Calico Joe Chapter 9. Chapter 9 takes place in the present when Paul Tracy is an adult and he has traveled to Calico Rock, Arkansas to try and talk to Joe Castle. Mr. Clarence Rook asked me to leave the newspaper's offices on Main Street, and I do so. I have 2 scoops of vanilla at an ice cream shop 2 doors down and listen to some casual town gossip as I watch the languid foot traffic on the sidewalk. After killing an hour, I drive 3 blocks west and higher up the bluff to a house at 130 South Street, where Mr. Rook has lived for the past 41 years. He is waiting, standing on the front porch, already in his drinking clothes. The house is a rambling old Victorian, with wide, sweeping covered porches, high arching windows, painted gables, all different colors, the most dominant being a soft pastel maize. The small lawn and flower beds are as neat and colorful as the house. A beautiful place, I say as I walk through the swinging gate of the white picket fence. It's a hand-me-down. My wife's family. Welcome. He is wearing a white linen shirt with a tail that falls almost to his knees, a pair of bulky white breeches that bunch around his bare ankles, and a pair of well-worn and scuffed espadrilles. He is holding a tall, slender beverage glass with a straw in his right hand, and with his left he waves at the side porch and says, "Follow me. Faye's back there somewhere." I follow him over the creaking boards and under the whirling ceiling fans. The porch is crowded with white wicker furniture, rockers, stools, drink tables, a long swing covered with pillows. Faye is Miss Rook, a spry little woman with white hair and a pair of large, round, orange-rimmed glasses. She welcomes me profusely, grabbing my hand with both of hers, as if she has not had a guest in years. "From Santa Fe?" she says. "I love Santa Fe, the home of the most fascinating woman I wish I could have met." "And that would be?" "Why, Georgia O'Keeffe, of course." "Faye's an artist," Mr. Rook adds, so this is becoming obvious. We are on the back porch by now, high above the white river in the distance, and I have unknowingly entered the studio of a serious painter. Stacks of easels, racks of perfectly organized paint bottles, boxes of brushes, all sizes and shapes. A few samples of her work reveal an impressionist fascination with flowers and landscapes. "Would you like something to drink?" Mr. Rook asks as he steps to a smaller bar. "Sure." "The house drink is lemon gin," he says as he pours a yellow mix from a pitcher into a glass filled with ice. I have never heard of lemon gin, but it is apparent I will not be given a choice of cocktails. "That stuff is dreadful," Miss Rook says, rolling her eyes as if the old boy might have a problem. He thrusts the glass at me and says, "It's not real lemon gin, which I'm told is real gin flavored with lemon, which sounds awful, but this is more of a lemonade with a bit of Gordon's thrown in to spice it up. Cheers." We tap glasses, and I take a sip. Not bad. We shuffle to the side porch and find seats amid the wicker. Miss Rook is a study in bright colors. Her white hair has a streak of purple above the left ear. Her toenails are painted pink. Her cotton drip-dry dress is a collage of red and blues. "You must stay for dinner," she says. "We eat from the garden. Everything is fresh. No meats. Is that okay?" There was no way to offer a polite no, and besides, I had already realized that a good restaurant might be hard to find in Calico Rock. Nor have I seen a motel. "If you insist," I say, and this seems to thrill her beyond words. "I'll go pick the squash," she says, bouncing to her feet and hurrying away. We sip our drinks and talk about the heat and humidity, but soon find our way back to more important matters. He begins, "You have to understand, Paul, that the Castles are very protective of Joe. If you met him, let's say randomly, out there on the street, for example, though that would never happen because Joe is seldom seen around town. But anyway, if you bumped into him and tried to say hello, he would simply walk away. I can't imagine Joe chatting with a stranger. It just doesn't happen. Over the years, we've had the occasional journalist show up looking for a story. There were a couple pieces written a long time ago, and they said things that weren't nice, such as, Joe has brain damage, Joe is disabled, Joe is bitter, and so on. The family is very distrustful of anyone who shows up and wants to talk about Joe. That's why they would never allow him to speak to you." "Could I talk to his brothers?" "Who am I? You're on your own, but I wouldn't recommend it. Red and Charlie are nice enough, but they can be tough guys. And when it comes to their little brother, they can turn nasty real quick. They carry guns like a lot of people around here, hunting rifles and such." So Paul is coming to find out that this town of Calico Rock, Arkansas is very protective of Joe Castle. And it might be harder than he thought to be able to speak to Joe Castle because between the town who Doesn't really get to interact with Joe much, but loves him and Joe's family. It's really hard to actually have a conversation with Joe Castle. The lemon gin is settling in, and I want to change the subject to anything but guns. I take a long sip, as does Mr. Rook, and for a moment the only sounds are the whirling blades of the ceiling fans. Finally I ask, "Did you see him play at Wrigley?" A wide, nostalgic smile breaks across his face, and he begins to nod. Twice. Faye and I drove to Chicago early in August of that summer. The Sports Illustrated piece had just been published, and the world couldn't get enough of Joe Castle. How did you get tickets? Scalpers. There were a lot of folks around here who wanted desperately to get to Chicago for a game, but word was out that you couldn't get tickets. Joe got a handful each game, and there was always a fight for those. I remember drinking coffee one morning downtown, and Mr. Herbert Mangrum walked in. He had some money, and he had just flown to Pittsburgh to watch the Cubs. Said he had to pay a scalper $300 for 2 tickets in Pittsburgh. Herb was a big talker, and he went on and on about seeing Joe in Pittsburgh. So you drove to Chicago with no tickets? That's right, but I had a contact. We got lucky and saw 2 games. Spoke to Joe after the first one. The kid was on top of the world. We were so proud. Which games? August 9th and 10th against the Braves. You missed the fun. He got ejected the next day. Mr. Rook licks his lips, cocks his head, and gives me a strange look. You know your stuff, don't you? Yes, sir, I do. Could you please drop the sirs and the misters? I'm Clarence, and my wife is Faye. Okay, Clarence. What do you want to know about the short, happy, and tragic career of Joe Castle? So here, basically, Clarence Rook is trying to feel out Paul Tracy and see if he actually is like a true Joe Castle fan. How many games did he play? Clarence asked, knowing the answer. 38, and I have the box score for every one. He would have played 43, but for the ejection on August 11th, the day after you saw him play. Clarence smiles, nods, takes a long sip, and says, You're wrong, Paul. He would have played 3,000 games if he hadn't been beamed. He sets his drink on the table, stands, and says, I'll be right back. He returns with a cardboard box, which he sets on the floor next to his sofa. From it he removes 4 thick 3-ring binders, all matched and perfectly organized. He places them on the wicker table and says, This is the book I never wrote, the story of Joe Castle. Many years ago I started the first chapter, then put it aside. This is not the only unfinished project, mind you. In fact, there are many, and I suppose the world is a better place because of my tendency to procrastinate. How can a newspaper editor procrastinate? Doesn't your life revolve around deadlines? Some deadlines, sure, but because we stare at the calendar all day long, we tend to shove aside for our other projects. So why didn't you write this book? Truthfully, it was the family. I talked to Red one time, and he didn't like the idea. This town is too small to make enemies, and if the family wasn't willing to cooperate, then the book was not worth writing. He flips through the second binder and finds the tab for August 11th, 1973. Sit over here, he says, patting a spot next to him. I move around to take a look, eager to see his research. This is one of my favorite stories, he says, pointing to an article in the Tribune about Joe getting ejected for charging the mound. There was a large photo of a brawl. By early August of that summer, the pitchers were throwing at Joe more and more. It's part of the ritual of being a rookie, especially one who happens to be on a tear. But the Cubs had Ferguson Jenkins and Rick Rochelle, 2 tough guys who threw hard and were known to protect their hitters. There were rumors that Jenkins and Rochelle and some of the other Cub pitchers had spread the word that if Joe got hit, the retaliation would be swift. As things turned out, Joe didn't need any help. The Braves had a journeyman lefty named Dutch Patton, a big, thick guy, 6'5" or so, and the first time up, Joe ripped a double, then stole third. We were still in Chicago but couldn't get tickets to the game, so we were watching on television. When Joe came up in the 3rd inning, Patton threw at his head and almost nailed him. The Cubs dugout went berserk. The fans were ready to riot. Joe yelled something at Patton and he yelled something back. The home plate umpire got involved. A very tense situation. Joe got back in the box, dug in, and Patton went into his windup. Just as he released the ball, Joe dropped his bat and sprinted towards the mound. He was so quick and fast he caught everybody, including Patton and the catcher, Johnny Oates, completely off guard. I've seen the film clip 100 times, and what happened was pretty frightening. Patton managed to swing his glove at Joe, who ducked and shot a right cross into Patton's mouth. A left hook to the nose knocked him down, and like a jackhammer, Joe pummeled him with 5 more shots to the face, each one drawing blood. Patton left the field on a stretcher, didn't wake up for 6 hours, and didn't pitch for a month. Johnny Oates finally managed to pull Joe off, and by then there were 40 players on the field slugging it out. The brawl lasted for 10 minutes, and there were something like 7 or 8 ejections. Joe was suspended for 5 games, and the Cubs lost all 5. So that's like a fun little story about Joe Castle and the fact that, yeah, like he seems like a pretty good-natured guy, but okay, he will come after you after a certain amount of time, and he can hold his own in a fight, as Patton found out. But because of that, he does get ejected, or suspended rather, for 5 games, and the Cubs lose all 5 of those games while he is gone. So I think that's a really fun story that Clarence Rook likes to tell a lot. As he talks, I listen intently and flip through his binder. I have a copy of the Tribune story, along with the photo, but my little scrapbook on Joe Castle is nothing compared to the spread before me. I know the story of Joe's retaliation against Dutch Patton, and Clarence has not missed a detail. What was so funny, at least to me, was that I had seen Joe pull the same trick before, Clarence is saying. When? I ask as he pauses and waits for me to prompt him. When he was 17, in a high school game against Heber Springs. Scouts all over the place, all here to see Joe. First time up, he hit a ball over the lights in right field. The second time up, the pitcher threw at his head. He kept his cool, waited. When you charge the mound, your biggest threat is being tackled from behind by the catcher. All 3 of the Castle boys understood this rather basic part of the game. Joe waited until the pitch was thrown, then sprinted to the mound. It was pretty ugly. These were kids, and the benches did not empty as fast as they do in the big leagues. Clarence's words trail off, as though he doesn't want to finish the story. Did he hurt the pitcher? Let's just say the kid didn't pitch for a few days, maybe weeks, maybe never. I don't know, but I'm sure he lost his enthusiasm for throwing beanballs. Joe was not a bully, just the opposite. He was a really nice kid, but he didn't like guys throwing at him. Who broke up the fight? The umpires. No player on the other team wanted to get near it. I flip back and forth and come across the cover of Sports Illustrated. I'll bet this caused some excitement around here. Oh yeah, not that there was a lack of excitement that summer. Everybody in town wanted to talk to the reporter. Let me refresh your drink there, Paul. He takes both glasses to the back porch. I follow and peek into the kitchen where Faye is slicing eggplant. When the drinks are ready, Clarence repacks his pipe and lights it. The fresh lemon gins in hand, we walk down the rear steps and gaze at the White River. Where did the nickname come from? I ask. Clarence chuckles and takes a sip. Sports Illustrated, I guess. That's the first time I ever heard of Calico Joe. But it stuck. The Chicago writers ran with it and never looked back. They had Shoeless Joe a half-century earlier, so I guess it was irresistible. It's such a perfect nickname. It is. Or was. We watch 2 men in a boat cast their lines and drift with the current. What does Joe do around here? I ask. He takes care of his baseball field. His field? Yeah. Joe Castle Field, over at the high school. He mows the grass every morning. He rakes the dirt, pulls the weeds, lays the chalk, sweeps the dugouts, and in general putters around the field 5 days a week. If it snows, Joe scrapes it off the bleachers. When it's raining, he sits in the dugout, third base side, and watches the puddles form around the infield. When it stops raining, he gently spreads the dirt around so there'll be no puddles the next time. About this time of year, after summer ball is over, he'll paint both dugouts and the press box. It's his field. Can I see him tomorrow? Again, I'm not his keeper. You can do whatever you want. But would he speak to me? I've already explained that, Paul. Joe doesn't want to speak to strangers. Would he speak to my father, if I brought him here? Clarence coughed and glared at me as if I had insulted his wife. Are you crazy? Maybe. He's dying, Clarence, and before he's gone, I would like for the 2 men to have a word. What kind of word? I'm not sure exactly, but ideally I would like my father to apologize. Have you discussed this with your father? No, not yet. And before I do, I need to know if Joe will agree to a meeting. I doubt seriously if that can happen, Paul, and it would be a huge mistake for Warren Tracy to show up here in Calico Rock. That could start some serious trouble. So they're having this great conversation, Paul and Clarence, and they're reminiscing on all these great things that Joe did, or all these like funny Joe Castle stories. They reminisce on how he got the nickname Calico Joe, which was basically just from a Sports Illustrated article. They named him Calico Joe, and then all the other news outlets kind of ran with it after that. We learn that Joe Castle is still alive. He is living in Calico Rock, And basically his job is to maintain the high school's baseball field that is named after him. And Paul really wants to speak to Joe, but Clarence says, it's not a good idea. He doesn't speak to strangers. And Paul says, well, I'd really like my dad to talk to him. My dad's dying of pancreatic cancer. Do you think he'd be willing to talk with him? And Clarence Rook basically says, no, I think that's a really bad idea. His last few lines of the chapter are, it would be a huge mistake for Warren Tracy to show up here in Calico Rock. So the whole town hates Paul's dad, but we still don't know why.